Widescreen displays in retro handhelds are becoming more popular than ever, and that's just one of the additions that Retroid has added to the Retroid Pocket 3, the newest installation in the Retroid Pocket line of handhelds. The system is fantastic. It's a great step up from the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus while keeping that same quality and value that we've come to know and love from Retroid. On the other hand, the launch of this device has been plagued with quality control issues and general mixed consensus from within the retro handheld community, especially from content creator Taki Udon, who worked closely with Retroid during the production of the device. But it's been a while since launch, and while I can't 100% guarantee that every single quality control issue will be ironed out, I can be pretty confident that you probably won't get any. And hey, let's not get all negative. All of my experiences with the Retroid Pocket 3 have been entirely positive, and that seems to mainly be the case with members of the Retroid subreddit as well. Although, I wouldn't be a good critic if I didn't discuss the negatives of the device. So let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of the Retroid Pocket 3. The hardware of the Retroid Pocket 3 is excellent. Like the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus, it feels very high quality despite the materials that they use to make it. The triggers feel alright, although they do require a fair bit of pressure to push down compared to something like the Nintendo Switch Lite. The shoulder buttons feel pretty good and are basically on par with that same device. The face buttons feel pretty good, but I'm more of a fan of the rubber conductive buttons that were present on the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus. Now, while early orders of this device did actually come with a set of rubber conductive buttons and even a set of tools to unscrew the device, I don't know if I want to open this, if it's anything like opening the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus. The analog sticks have some major upgrades over the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus. First, the right analog stick is now an analog stick, instead of that weird digital slider thing they were using on the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus. And both sticks have now been upgraded to add L3 and R3 capabilities, meaning they can now click down. This is the standard with every controller, and it allows for much more freedom with controls across modern games, game streaming, and even more hotkey options in older games like NES and SNES. You can finally have 2 analog stick click downs to open up the RetroArch menu. The sticks are now also properly recessed into the device, making it much easier to pocket. Speaking of pocketability, this device is only slightly bigger than my iPhone XR, meaning you'll have no problem putting it in your pocket and taking it on the go. It's not RG351P or Nintendo 3DS levels of pocketable, but it's a great balance between size, ergonomics, and portability. I won't get too in-depth with the measurements, but here are a few comparisons that I have to other handhelds. Compared to the 16:9 handhelds that I own, it's typically the smallest of the bunch, with the only exception being the PlayStation Portable. It's bigger than the RG351P and the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus, and it's much thinner than the latter, which does improve the pocketability. The closest handheld to the Retroid Pocket 3 that I personally own is the Nintendo Switch Lite. It's about the same thickness and only slightly smaller. If you're already carrying a Nintendo Switch Lite around, you'll have no problem carrying the Retroid Pocket 3 with you. If you want more comparisons to other handhelds, feel free to check out RetroSizer, or even just the Retroid subreddit. Both of those have great resources on size comparisons. RetroSizer in particular is fantastic. The I/O on the device remains exactly the same from the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus, with a USB-C port for data and charging, a headphone jack, a micro HDMI for display out. Unlike the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus, the USB-C port is now at the bottom, which makes it a bit annoying to play and charge at the same time. The micro HDMI port is absolutely fantastic, and really sets the Retroid Pocket 3 apart from the competition. While the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus also had a micro HDMI output, it only did 480p at 4:3, leading some displays to stretch out the display into widescreen or have a weird crop or do something else with the display. I get that, 4:3, having an output like that is going to make sure the emulators stay in 4:3, but I really didn't like it. Now, this outputs in 720p at 16:9, which is fantastic for playing games on your TV. It would have been nice to see 1080p output so it could have theoretically acted like an Android streaming box, but it is what it is. I'll take what I can get. Back to the buttons. The home, power, volume, select and start all feel slightly different, but serve their purpose for how often they'll realistically be used. Unfortunately, when you do use those buttons, you'll be reaching for very strange places compared to other handhelds and controllers. On the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus, for example, the home, start, select buttons are all on the front of the device. The volume buttons and the power button were both on the top of the device, making it hard to accidentally knock, but still easy to access. This is fantastic. Almost perfect. So, understandably, Retroid completely changed it. In a move that has never been seen on a handheld or even a standard controller, the start and select buttons are now on the top of the device. The volume buttons are on the left, which is fine, but they're very easy to bump. and the home button is on the right, so same applies there. Like I said earlier, you aren't really using these buttons a lot, so it's not too big of a deal, but it does make it really annoying to, hit those buttons. And especially when I'm demoing this device to people, I have to, kind of explain where the start and select buttons are because they're used to it being on the front, like it should be. I also really, really hope that you aren't planning on getting a white model of this, because reports have shown that that's more of like a yellow. I can't confirm nor deny whether this issue has been fixed yet, but if I find anything, I'll put it on the screen now. Along with the color issue, the Retroid Pocket 3 had a bunch of other quality control issues, from brightness flickering to app crashes. Taki Udon has a fantastic video detailing his experience working with Retroid and their quality control team, and I would highly recommend checking it out. I personally didn't experience any QC issues, and I would assume that this late into the launch cycle that they've fixed all of them, but I don't feel confident saying 100% that you will get a device in perfect condition. Now, the software experience on this is awesome. It's very good for an Android handheld, especially for one without custom firmware support from developers like Black Seraph. The device is essentially stock and even comes with Google Play services, which is very rare for these cheap Chinese handheld devices. Basically what that means is you can actually get access to the Google Play Store, which isn't seen in even some of the top most premium handholds from manufacturers like Ambernick. The device comes with a front end that emulates the Nintendo Switch user experience, and even automates the process of downloading RetroArch cores and configuring them. It's really nice. Of course, the front end also automatically scrapes box art for a nice viewing experience. Thanks to the flexibility of Android, you also have a ton of other front end options to choose from, like Dig, Pegasus, the Reset Collection, and Daijishu? Which is what I personally use. The device has a modified setup experience where you can choose and install, hand-picked emulators and ports, enable Google Play services, and do all the standard Android stuff like set up networking and time zones. The emulators are the exact same emulators you'll be used to if you've ever done emulation on an Android device. Things like RetroArch, Movement 64 Plus, Drastic, etc. And if you've ever bought any of these on an Android device before, you can just log into your Google account and re-download them. Android 11 also allows for more flexibility when it comes to future-proofing and newer games, which is a much-needed upgrade over Android 9 on the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus. And while Retroid did promise to bring Android 11 to that device, nothing has been announced yet. Setting up emulation on Android can be much more difficult than the typical plug-and-play experiences from manufacturers like Ambernick and their Linux handhelds. These typically come with games and emulators set up out of the box, and while it's not the best experience, it does work. Now, is that legal? Well, no, but plus, the addition of Android 11 can bring some hassles when it comes to letting emulation apps access your file storage. These privacy features are great on a mobile phone, but not so much on a gaming device. Now, I've also noticed slightly more sluggish navigation on the device when using Wallpaper Engine, which is a problem I never had on the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus. However, this is really an issue for me anymore because I'm rarely in the home screen. I'm going to assume that this is because of a combination of a high resolution display, a brand new operating system, and the exact same chipset and RAM. You might have a better experience on 3 gigs of RAM, but I can't personally confirm that. I'm also experiencing a really weird issue when it comes to using external controllers. When using the Retroid Pocket 3, you'll want to set the button layout on the device to the Xbox layout, which is built into the settings. That makes it much more compatible with more Android games and emulators, as they typically bind for Xbox controllers out of the box. Now, while it does mean the buttons on the device itself are going to be flipped from what they actually do, it adds up for a much better experience that you're going to be much more used to if you mainly play on Xbox or PlayStation. Unfortunately, if you want to use an actual Xbox controller with the device, you then need to change it back to the Retroid layout, and then rebind all the controls in your games if they don't auto-bind. Things like Dolphin and Redream don't auto-bind, and you'll need to go through and set every controller button every time you want to change from your external to your internal controller and vice versa. It is really fucking annoying. Like, I would play this on my TV so much more if this issue was fixed. I feel like this would be so easy to fix in software, but on the other hand, I'm not a developer, so I won't comment on that. If you are a developer, let me know in the comments how you'd think that could be fixed. The Retroid front end, while it is great, it also has some shortcomings, specifically the way it handles Android games and apps. Right now, the first thing you see when you open the Retroid launcher is the Android app menu, which I think is counterintuitive for a device meant for emulation. If you want to get to your emulated ROMs and games, you have to click on the emulation submenu, which then brings you to that Switch-style interface. I don't know why this exists. The way I would do it personally is I would have the emulation submenu with the Switch style interface front and center. I would completely get rid of the apps submenu, and then I would add the Android apps alongside the Switch, like, the emulated games in its own little submenu. I think that would make the user experience so much better, and I feel like it would be pretty easy to implement because the code should be already there for building subsections, but again, I'm not a developer, I'm not going to say anything about this. I just think that would improve the experience tenfold. Now let's talk about the reason you're actually buying this device: to play games. The performance is the exact same as the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus, pretty much. It's the exact same chipset and hardware. Retroid claimed that there would be performance improvements because it's running Android 11 and it should have updated drivers, but I personally don't see any differences. Anything under and including Nintendo 64, Nintendo DS, and PSP runs flawlessly. PS2 and GameCube can run some lighter games, and community enhancements have seriously pushed the limits of this device, especially with the introduction of Dolphin for handheld. But I wouldn't buy this device knowing that you want to play GameCube and PS2. I would say buy this device for N64, PSP, DS, all that, and don't expect GameCube and PS2 to run, but try out your favorite games, and if they run, hey, that's a bonus. There's a fantastic spreadsheet where users have documented their experiences playing GameCube and PS2 games and the exact settings and emulator that they're using. I would highly recommend checking it out before you buy this device. A good amount of Android games also play flawlessly, with some smaller indie console games also having ports, whether they're unofficial from GitHub or something like that, or just uploaded onto the Play Store. Games like Celeste, Minecraft, Stardew Valley all have ports. Unfortunately, the port experience on Android isn't as good as some of those Android handhelds, which will have like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle games or, I don't know, fucking Owlboy, but it's pretty good. The Retroid Pocket 3 also has a built-in screen mapping tool for games that either don't support the inbuilt controls or don't support controllers at all, like Call of Duty Mobile. The HDMI output also looks very clean and works great for playing games on a TV, except the controller issue, but if you're using the internal controls, it's a great experience. Thanks to the 16:9 display, you can now also stretch out your Dreamcast games to widescreen without causing any distortion in the main picture. It's a great experience. I personally don't know what other systems support this, but on Dreamcast it works flawlessly. Now, while the Retroid Pocket 3 definitely has its flaws, it has some fantastic performance and great build quality, if you get a good model. However, I don't know if I'd recommend this system. One, because the day I'm fucking filming this video, the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus comes out. Cool, great, 4 gigs of RAM, 128 gigs of built-in storage. I bought the thing like 3 months ago, and now they do this? I'm sorry. Now, my actual points here, before the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus came out, are I wouldn't recommend it to anyone who already owns a Retroid Pocket 2 Plus, unless they play a lot of 16:9 systems like PSP or use game streaming or play a lot of Android games. And I also don't know if I'd recommend it as a first handheld, unless the user already has experience with Android emulation on their phone or something. Now, if you've owned a handheld before, or you're experienced with PC emulation or Android emulation, I highly recommend this device. Although you might want to wait for the 3 Plus, that should have much better performance, including GameCube and PS2 running actually good. Just hold off. I probably won't buy it. I probably won't review it. I'm trying to buy a new camera. If you like this video, hit that button. If you really like this video, press subscribe so I can win arguments against my friends thanks to my numbers. I also like big number, inflate my ego. Bye bye.